Role models in video games. It's kind of a weird topic because no one really talks about it. It's kind of funny, even though a lot of us grow up with video games and don't really think about too much how it's shaped us. I mean, we'd think about that, but not really about how the characters sometimes really shape us. We could play video games nowadays, and we play faceless protagonists to win like battle royales and stuff like that. I hate giving that comparison, but like that's what's popular with stuff nowadays. So I can't help but like just think about that when I think of gaming nowadays. Although there's always that whole plethora of games out there, indie games and such all over, like Steam and stuff like that, and the Switch, Xbox, PlayStation. It's we're at a time in games, and I think that's true for I don't know any game, any time in the future. Is that as more and more games are made, more people who are inspired by other people's games that are masterpieces, there therefore go on to create more masterpieces, and therefore for us as time goes on there's just more masterpieces to get our hands on in the world of video games. So we're not here to talk about that. We're here to talk about, like I said, role models in video games. So to give a little perspective on what I consider a role model for myself is that around the PS2 era, I think I was around the age of 10ish, 12ish, and I had my first PlayStation 2. And on that I had Jack and Daxter 1, the precursor legacy, I think it's called. Though I forget the full title, but Jack and Daxter 1. And then, I always thought that game was kind of cool because on the cover there's this tall, cool guy. He's got a little orange sidekick dude, and like, he's got the cool hair, and he's got kind of the Goku Super Saiyan anime hair, but like I never watched anime growing up or was super into it. So that didn't even phase me, but I just thought his hair looked cool anyway. And the game in this story goes on about how he just has to collect a bunch of orbs, save the world, blah, blah, blah. And throughout the whole game, he doesn't talk. He's all about through facial expressions and such. And his sidekick is the one that does all of the yapping, I should say. Not even talking because he's too talkative. And the whole point of the game is that his friend falls into a vat of eco energy or whatever. I forget what they say. They call her black eco. And he comes out and he ends up being this little orange creature. And so the whole journey is we've got to collect these orbs, go to the north, and find this guy who could turn him back to human. So, anyways, it's just one of those things where, like, as a kid, this game was made by Naughty Dog, the guys who also made, nowadays, The Last of Us. They made Uncharted for the PlayStation 3 era, and they made, Crash Bandicoot before Jack and Daxter. So they went from Crash, Jack, Nathan Drake, and then to I actually don't even know the protagonist's name in Last of Us, but those who played it know. I did not play that game yet, surprisingly. But I didn't have a PlayStation, so that's why. Like PlayStation 3, 4, 5, skipped all those. Went to Xbox and PC. Anyways, so with the first game in Jack and Daxter, he's a protagonist that, doesn't really speak much, and that's kind of intentional. As I bring up Naughty Dog, the whole point is that, like, as they progress with their stories, they got better with storytelling and stuff, and, but like early on, they really got the concept of a video game right, like the gameplay. So their first ever character doesn't speak, just makes fun noises, super charismatic, and they really nailed creating a character with Crash Bandicoot who was just again charismatic, who was designed in a way that looked cool and appealing to kids, and then just focused on the game. And they had, with 3 games in the PlayStation 1 era at least, to work on that. And so they kind of perfected that as that went on. And then in the PlayStation 2 era, new hardware, new possibilities. Let's dive into a little more story. First game, protagonist doesn't talk at all. They stick with the kind of know and see what can we do with the PlayStation 2. And so as a kid playing that first game, you're kind of drawn to it because of the nice, beautiful colors, all these crazy new lands, and this whole story about eco energy. And the creative mind as a kid kind of goes off and like, ooh, green eco heals you, and like red eco shoots fireballs, and blue eco makes you go fast. And so in your spare time when you beat the game, or even like when you're playing it, you're thinking of like, I don't know, like your own little like fan fiction of like possibilities of like, oh, what if there was rainbow eco, or like magenta eco, like different colors, right? And you try to like create like things. I remember even as I kept playing through the game series, I had this little journal, and after the last game was Jack and Daxter 3, if you don't count like Jack X and all those other games that came after, like the spin-offs. I remember writing in my little journal like Jack 4, 5, 6, and 7 forms, and I had the idea on that Jack would still hold, because in the third game he has a dark side and a light side you could transform into, right? And so I always thought like, oh, in Jack like 4, he'd be some type of like primal monster, dark monster, not just like evil, but now he turns into like sort of beast form. And then like as it goes on, there's even a light beast form, and it's that type of thing where your creativity just goes off, and that's what draws you again to the game in the first place. So when you're playing this game set in this world of just like unreality, basically fantasy, obviously, you sort of, because the character is somewhat of a blank slate, kind of how Bungie did with Master Chief and Halo, is that the whole point is that you make them talk as minimal as possible, if not at all, and you make them expressive and still fun to like watch and interact with things. And the moral goal of the whole game for him is to help his friend. Now that's a very simple thing, whatever. And even before with the Crash Bandicoot games, the real moral goal was like, I guess, stop the evil scientist. But like, he's kind of a bandicoot, right? He's just doing it because he just happens to like want to do it, whatever. His sister Coco tells him to do it, and blah blah blah, because she's smart and he trusts his sister, right? So and if we go back to the Crash Bandicoot thing, the little quick note to take from there is that like, cool character, everyone likes him, does the right thing. You go to Jak and Daxter, cool character, everyone likes him, does the right thing, wants to help his friend. Just like a little added on thing, right? It's a character with a little more depth, I'd say, than Crash Bandicoot, obviously, not being an animal. So anyways, so you play for that first game, you just think it's so cool and stuff. And when you're around that age of like 10 to 12, you kind of like, in school, right? So like in elementary school in Canada, we go from like grade 1 to 6, then middle school is 7, 8, and then high school is grades 9 to 12. So when you're in like the grades, like, I don't know, 3 to 6, even 1 to 6, you can say, is that whenever you see a kid that's 1 grade older than you, you're like, oh wow, that's an older kid. He sits in the back of the bus. He's in grade 8. Oh my gosh, or grade 6 or whatever. And it's like, it's always that idea that like whoever's older than you is cooler than you because they're like taller, older, might be allowed to go see like PG-13 movies or something lame like that, right? But it's super cool to you as a kid. So you look at that, and then you also sometimes, catch things on TV or in movies about like how teenagers are so cool and they live like the crazy life, all before you hit high school and realize it's all bullshit and it's like the worst thing ever. But that's besides the point. For some kids, most kids, and there's always exceptions, right? There's always good and bad times in high school and all that stuff. But anyways, so with Jak and Daxter 1, blank slate, but it had all these aspects that like kids just generally gravitate to thinking is cool. In terms of like an older kid situation, as I just explained. So you kind of look at him and it's like, wow, I guess I'm playing as like an older kid and to simplify things as best we can. Or like just a really cool guy who's doing things right and he's strong and he could go across these lands and he's like a capable, competent guy. And throughout, he kind of like is charming to this girl, or the girl's charming to him. I actually forget the exact chemistry that goes on in the first game. But basically he's attracted her, she's contracted him. And like, the Daxter's always trying to hit on her and she's like, buzz off, little guy, that type of comedy, fun stuff, storytelling type thing. So throughout the game, blah, blah, blah. And so it's like, wow, he's even like going to get the girl. But why does the girl even look at him? Because, well, he's a good guy. He's never treated her wrong. He helps his friends and he's strong and he's competent and blah, 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 blah. And so all these characteristics as you see growing up as a kid, and it's like, wow, that's like, this guy literally saved the world in this video game. And, we could step back and be like, okay, hey kid, it's a video game. What are you doing? But when you're a kid and all you have are video games, and even if like you're growing up and you don't play video games, if you watch movies and stuff, you're kind of taking your moral compass from not just your family and friends around you, but also the movies you take in. There's a lot of like debate and like controversy and talk about how like our world is just like full of like romantic movies that most people will hate, but like for some reason really talk to like, the female audience for some reason, right? It's just like that mushy stuff. But like, and we could go into debate about like, do guys really like that stuff and they hide their feelings, or like, is there really something else going on? I think there is, but like, who knows, whatever. Point being is that like, there are these concepts of just like what really shapes us and what draws us and stuff like that. And so, with the first game, it's just the pinnacle of cool for a kid, right? To look at Jak and Daxter 1. And we haven't even gotten to Jak and Daxter 2 and 3, where those themes really amplify. So, and then you get into the second game, Jak and Daxter, Jak 2 or whatever. And so then he finally talks for the first time and he's like edgy and cool. And it should be noted that around this time, GTA was getting really popular. I think it already was, but Naughty Dog wanted to like make a game sort of close to GTA, as that was selling really well at the time. So they made Jak 2 way more closer to GTA, made him talk, made him more edgy. And, as you can know with like, the Sonic fans, and when they introduced Shadow, I was one of those kids who thought Shadow was super cool. He was this guy that was like the hero, but he was the anti-hero. It's like, you know, as a kid, we always have those moments of like, oh, we're not the best at something. We might get rejected in a such social situation from other kids or something. So we feel like the outcast, right? And so a character like Shadow the Hedgehog, or even like the bad side of Jack, who in the start of Jack 2, actually, he ends up being shot into like this world that's complete, like desolate, almost apocalyptic, Mad Max type feel, even though the third game's more Mad Max feel, but we'll get to that. And so in the second game, you're kind of like even put into prison. They experiment on you. They pump you with dark eco, whatever. And then he talks and wants to, like, first words out of his mouth, I want to kill Prax. I'm going to kill Praxis, the guy who put him in that prison for like 2 years. Anyways, point being is that so there's all these like elements of like, you know, the idea of feeling like the outcast. So when you take a character and bring it to the edgy side, and at the time the edgy things were kind of cool. And nowadays we look back and think it's cringe and blah blah blah, to be like, huh, you think you could beat me in my power? And then you see some nerd saying that with glasses with like acne all over his face. So it really like diminishes the coolness of the phrase when you first saw it as like a powerful character in a video game who did win in that situation, saying something as corny as you can't stop my power and stuff like that, or I'm gonna kill you, like stuff a kid isn't supposed to say. So that's why it's cool and like appealing to a kid that a character can encapsulate all that and be like, you know, they might not be loved by certain characters in the game or really liked, but in the end they still win and then somewhat liked. And so it gives this notion that like if you come off as like a threat, you might gain a bit of respect, but as long as you don't like hurt people, you don't look like the villain. It's this weird like middle ground of, or like one side of it where like you can look evil but not be evil type cool thing. And you know, when you look at like Disney movies, who knows, just kind of like animated movies in general, the villains always have this like pointy look to them. If you know any concept of like character design, characters who seem to be like nice tend to be made out of like round shapes, and like characters who are supposed to be, you know, big and sturdy and strong are usually made out of square type shapes. And the characters who are supposed to be considered as dangerous are made out of like shapes like triangles or like points, right? So if you look, when I go back to Crash Bandicoot, the reason why he was kind of cool is that his character design was a bit of mix of like round, square, and triangle looks, like, and the PS1 era had like a polygon look to it. So he was like kind of a pointy, edgy looking character without being like dark, like a character like Shadow the Hedgehog or Jack 2's dark form, right? So, with that in mind, as we go on with like Jack 2, it's like it goes from like the blank slate, you could be in this like goody two shoes, whatever, and then it's like it's almost like as if the game is growing up with you, and you start to hit a stage. Maybe you're in like middle school or something where you want to be taken more seriously or something, or you feel like you need to change something about yourself because the social pressure or being around these other kids or something is like influencing you in that way. It's like, I gotta step up my game. So the first thing, you don't know what to look to other than like older people, right? Or whatever's going on in film, movies, games, whatever. So you kind of look at like, oh, well, this guy seems to be like super cool and like wins and stuff like that, and he's edgy, so I guess I should be edgy and that type of thing. Now, not to say that like in Jack 2, Jack is just this ball of edginess, just like how Shadow has kind of been distilled to throughout the years with like even his own video game spinoff where it's like him shooting guns at aliens and people. It's not really to that, but Jack 2 did give you the freedom of like shooting civilians and then blah blah blah. But even though in the story he's supposed to still be the good guy, he just happens to talk now, and he's got attitude, and he's got, you know, he'll speak his mind and be up in people's faces if he doesn't like them. But it still kind of stems from that thing in the first game where it's all rooted in like, I'm not taking shit from anyone, but it's still rooted in the like good guy trying to help people and save the world. So it's this weird mix, right? So it's a bit of like the game and the people who make the game, like Naughty Dog, appealing to what's doing well in the video game market, but at the same time they're creating a character that just is just like it's appealing to kids for a reason, and the kids were getting older, and it's appealing to that demographic more and more. So it's kind of like growing up with them on purpose, on not, and it still somewhat feels natural. You could say it's artificial, as in they pumped in these elements to attract kids to play these games because they seem more mature, but I digress. Doesn't matter. Point is in throughout Jack 2, you kind of feel like cool, you feel like you're gaining maturity, even though you're not necessarily. But I don't know, the games get even more in depth with story, and even when you get into Jack 3, the story is like really front and center, and it's this grandiose like Mad Max adventure where you're exiled and you have to do what's right, and then you finally In this game, you actually get a light form to balance out the dark form. So then it becomes like this idea, like just literally visually, be a good or bad person. And throughout the story, obviously you're Jack and you're supposed to be a good person. And, you know, I've talked a lot about Jack and Daxter, but another person I should be talking about also is Ratchet from Ratchet and Clank, a series also I followed on the PS2 era throughout the first 3 games, even Deadlocked, we can say, but that's not too important to this video with the whole role model idea. So it's like, and with like Ratchet and Clank, people always complain that like with the remakes they made it too Disney or too Pixar, where like they made the characters distill them to like these really nice, feel good, hey man, I'm your friend, when they always point to the first game where he was like this kind of like rough mechanic who was like a kind of a dude, surfer dude attitude. He's like, hey man, just like I just want to go on my hoverboard, dude. And it's like, when you think about it, it's like they were doing that same thing where they're trying to appeal to an older audience, kind of like how Jack 2 did without even doing the whole like appealing to them at first with like a character who doesn't talk. Funny enough, Ratchet and Clank is made by Insomniac Games. Their first game was the Spyro series, which kind of did that a little bit. It was kind of like, I feel like Spyro is somewhere in between Jack's character in Jack and Daxter 1 and Jack 2, right? But like, it's in between the edginess and the innocent, non-talking protagonist. So they kind of like skipped over those steps as Naughty Dog was focusing on that, as Insomniac had more time to just work with that in their games with their characters talking right off the bat. But again, the idea of like Spyro, he's this pointy, kind of smooth character you're supposed to identify with as like this like kid who's trying to come up in the world and show he's mature, like again, relating and appealing to kids. So it's like, if a kid could like see himself and his personality traits and stuff, and like, you know, in the moments they fail in social situations, somewhat the underdog feeling in these characters, it's really easy for them to be drawn to a character in a video game, right? So it's like you could pick a video game, it's like, oh, this has a cool dragon on it, this has a cool guy with like a gun looking thing, it's really big, doesn't look like a normal gun, like in Jack 2 he's holding like this big I forget what the gun's called in the game, but the big red one or the yellow one, I can't remember. But it's like, you know, these elements that pull the kid in, and then the idea of the character is subtly like easily puts the kid in the main character's shoes. The kid doesn't have a choice, right? Like, you're playing the game, you have to play as the main character. This is your main character. There you go. Now play the game. But it's more that like it makes it easier for the kid to like the character the more similar they feel towards it, right? I mean, humans in general, if we meet people and try to make new friends, we gravitate to people who just act and seem like us, basically. So yeah. So with the Ratchet and Clank series is that like Ratchet had this idea of edginess, and he meets Clank, who's just like this typical kind of nerdy Poindexter, but like helps him, he's the brains and Ratchet's the bronze type situation. And like, you know, Ratchet is somewhat dumbed down pretty well in the first game, and not like, I shouldn't say dumbed down, but like he's supposed to be this like not super smart in terms of numbers guy, but he's a street smart, he's a mechanic, of course, so he's an engineer smart. But again, not that Poindexter, not too much into the manner stuff. And it's funny because then you get to Ratchet and Clank, you know, 2 going commando, and then Ratchet and Clank Up Your Arsenal. As he's going through those games, like the stakes of, you know, going from just a mechanic who thinks about himself or whatever to like helping Clank to helping save the universe a bunch of times. And you could see as the game goes on, he like, from game 1 to 2, it also has somewhat that much of a, I wouldn't say dramatic, but a significant change in his maturity, right? So he goes from like being about himself in the first game, saving the world, and like, wow, this is like cool, and we did it. And then in the second game, he's kind of like really talks to people like he's a guy who have authority, like okay, I've done this once before, let's do it again. And it's always that like save your friends, do things for your friends, do things for the right people, save the innocent, fight the evil bad guys. Sometimes it's as simple as like the big corporation, whatever. But like the point of at the end of the day is that like these are characters that, you know, have flaws. They might not be the smartest. They might not be. It's funny because I was describing Jack as like the ultimate cool guy, and he has all those traits. But it's like, it's kind of funny. I guess Ratchet would be more of a flawed character than Jack is. But you know, the thing is that at the end of the day, they're just supposed to be these characters that just like either have flaws or you can identify with, and like just seem relatable in the sense that like they're either naive, don't know what's out in the world, and they're willing to have the courage, even though they're scared, to explore it, and for the sake of other people, right? It's that ultimate virtue of like, just, you know, life is, I mean, we're going to get into something a little more over, you know, I don't know what the word is, but like an overview, top-down view, wisdom to take out of this is that, life in the end, like not even talking about the video games, is like life in the end, one of the main goals is like really just to connect with other human beings. Like it's one thing to like I could use the analogy of like a nerd who's socially inept, can't talk to girls, plays a video game about like a dating simulator, right? Where like he's got like let's assume like a video game girlfriend or whatever in this dating simulator, and like yeah, the character won't challenge him and stuff in the video game, so like he can stick with that, or he could step out of that, and venture off in the world, get rejected, but still do it to find in the pursuit of something, of love, and something mutually beneficial, something beautiful, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, to do that, he has to overcome his fear, he has to accept his weaknesses, and he has to just, at the end of the day, go venture off and, grow, essentially. So that's the idea of any of these characters in general. If there's no change in a character, nothing really happened, right? If there's no 5-second moment of realization or epiphany, or of like, wow, so like we did the big thing, but what really mattered was like the motivation, or like the relationship between these two characters as the big thing was coming about, and was, the world was saved, or the universe was saved, and that type of thing, right? So I don't know. So it's just funny that nowadays there's definitely a lot of characters with like role models out there. I can't even, like, even you could say Nathan Drake, but I can't really speak on that because I haven't played those games much. But and it's funny that like we think of characters like Mario, right? It's like what role model do you get out of that? I mean, as simple as he is like somewhat of a blank slate character, and he doesn't talk too much, but he's like Italian, blah blah blah. But like, I don't know, the best you could get on Mario, I think, is that like he's the good guy. Princess is in need. He goes, saves the princess, gets a kiss because she loves him, and blah blah blah, and he loves her. And it's like, and even like without even just that main plot line, there's other games where he's been in where like, the whole idea is that Mario, you're just like you're just Mario, right? It's funny. I could just say that and you understand what all of he is, right? He's just the simple vessel to just go out and be bubbly but strong and help people. Like it's those same themes of like just like not necessarily the perfect person, but like someone who's just like, just you could put your shoes in, just play a game and not think twice about it, and then the whole point is you do the right thing. That's the main thing. And it's funny that like you could kind of distill most movies, games, or stuff. It's like you're supposed to do the right thing, and then you can point to other games where the whole point is to be the villain and you're supposed to be doing the wrong thing. Although some games could take the angle of that and be like, oh well, the villain thinks he's doing the good thing, but he's not. But that's how all stories kind of go. Like even if with like the story of World of Warcraft, at the start of the universe in that game, it's like there are these titans or whatever. I forget what the exact terminology and names of all of them are, but essentially like there are these titans of the universe, and like the good ones see corruption in the universe and they go out and try to stop it. And then one of the guys goes out and sees there's so much corruption in the universe, there's literally no point. We might as well destroy everything. So it's kind of like that. And so he wants to destroy everything to put everything out of its misery, because there's no point in stopping the corruption if it's never going to end. But the good people say, no, we need to fight corruption, because the beauty of life that comes out of those spots in the universe that aren't corrupted is worth it. And so it's like one side says fight the inevitable corruption, the other one says just give in to the inevitable corruption. Both thinking it's best for the universe and world, but one is considered good, one is evil, because one is willing to just destroy lives and take life, and the other one is more to preserve it, right? It's a very interesting concept that, like, yeah, that's it. It's just so, it's somewhat imbued in everything, a lot of things that, like, if you're ever trying to make a villain seem, you want to care about them and understand their motivation, there's a million ways to do that. Give them a story that's very relatable, and then, like, show how they realize that the evil route makes sense to them logically, but might not to the public who see them at first glance, right? It's just, it's an interesting thing to think about. So then they become the role models, the anti-role model, unless some kid really identifies being an outcast and thinks the villain is right all the time. And we see that countless times in movies and stuff like that. Just like even like in the Incredibles, where like the kid thinks, oh, I'm gonna be Mr. Incredible's like sidekick, and then obviously because Mr. Incredible says you're never gonna be a sidekick, blah blah blah, he sees every reason why heroes are kind of assholes, and he understandable. Like, he got rejected from his idols, he wanted to be good, and he just getting hit with rejection. And it's like, well, at that point, I might as well give in to the evil and screw it all. Same thing with the whole, I just explained with the World of Warcraft story, preserving versus destroying, right? It's like both seem to both, the whole end goal of both seem to be good depending on whose side you're looking at from, right? If you know, they understand how the steps they got to that point of logic. But in the end, people, I'd like you to talk about what your role models were. For me, again, as I already basically explained this whole video, is people like Jak and Daxter, Ratchet and Clank, Crash Bandicoot, Spyro, and like, if I have to think even further than that, it's like I could even say like Master Chief and Halo, Gears of War, Marcus Fenix, just because, like, you know, even as you get older, you want to be this strong man who can protect people, who can provide, blah, 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 all that typical. I understand we're in a world of, like, you know, people have all sorts of genders and stuff, but for most people in the world, and you know, even if you are of like a different gender, if you're like you know, female, male, or non-binary or whatever, the whole point, my point is that, like, we kind of should be striving. It kind of really doesn't matter with the gender, but like, it kind of speaks to what I'm saying is straight men for the most part. But like, even if you're a gay man, the whole point is that, like, you're supposed to just strive to grow, and you're supposed to strive to be someone competent that people want to be around. Why is that? It's not just to be something useful to society, for society to take advantage of you. No, it's the whole point is that you're supposed to be this pillar in the community that connects with other people who also want to be pillars in the community. What does that mean? It means you work on yourself to become a human being that makes, you know, you don't look at the world that, like, I don't ask God for, or ask the world or universe, if you don't believe in God, for lesser what it's this famous quote, I'm gonna butcher it to hell, but it's like, you don't ask the world for weaker problems, but you ask the world for stronger shoulders to carry them, right? Because it's one thing to try and protect, like, if you're a parent, to protect your kid from a world of all its evils, then you just basically keep that kid a kid, or you teach him to be strong, so anything in the world that hits him, he can basically, you know, fight it, or like control it, or like, you know, at least run away from it, in terms of, like, for now, and then tackle it later when he's stronger and smarter and all sorts of things like that. Point is that we all should be trying to strive for our better selves, because in the end, it's like, this life is so short. You're just trying to basically, you know, in my eyes, you're trying to just get to the upper limits of yourself to get the most out of the life you have in front of you. And you know, that point could kind of go into all sorts of directions based on where you are in life and stuff like that. So for someone who's poor versus someone who's rich, versus someone who's, you know, black, someone who's white, someone who's gay, someone who's straight, there's all these variables, and like, and you know, if you live in one place versus another, it's very relative. But at the end of, and so that's why the reason why I say it's relative is that sometimes the extent of that can only go so far. So you do the best you can in the communities you are in to provide and connect with those, because if you have someone's back, they have your back. And the reason you also want to, like, well, again, to me, the idea is that, like, you want to be the guy who's able to, this is a weird analogy, but you want to be able to, you want to be the guy who has the, let's say, I don't know, you get Excalibur, you're the guy who goes through the journey, he finally gets the sword, he pulls it out of the rock, and he sheathes it, right? He puts it in his, like, little sword pouch, wherever the you call that thing to hold the sword on the side of your belt. And the whole point of life is that, like, to be powerful enough that you can destroy, but have the choice and choose not to, is kind of one of the greatest virtues. You know, to have the sword, but to not just use it willy-nilly, really, is kind of the point of just got the signs of a great person, right? It's like again, going back to Jak and Daxter, Ratchet and Clank, they're good people because they grow, they become strong, but in the end, they only use it to fight off those who impose on the innocent, right? It's like, to have power and to choose not to use it for evil is one of the greatest virtues. And it's one of those things that over time, as I've played video games and reflected on my past of video games and life, and, you know, even from stories from movies and stuff, it's just that kind of becomes the point, and to really, like, kind of to life, really, I guess. So from the small beginnings of a kid playing, you know, Jak and Daxter, trying to collect some precursor orbs, to the idea of, like, becoming competent, but using that competence to become nice, because honestly, and it's like, why would you just be nice? It's again with that duality of preserve life versus destroy all life. What's the point? Because it's just way easier to destroy something than it is to build something. That's kind of the more bigger point here with that also. It's like I've seen personally, and I think we all have in our lives to an extent, different levels, especially how easy it is to just create more evil and wrongdoing in the world. Like you can just, as simple as like, I don't know, you go to school and you just like leave trash on the ground in your classroom and you just leave your classroom, right? Let's say in high school or college or whatever, or even elementary. Let's say high school or college for the sake of argument. And it's like you're old enough and smart enough to know that's the wrong thing to do. And then you don't even think about the guy who has to come in later and like clean that up. It's like you just, and especially if like you make it really bad and like, I don't know, because you know kids nowadays, they're like trash washrooms and shit like that. And so like you could be a kid who like, I don't know, he gets like an apple from home and like doesn't want to eat it and he thinks it's funny to like look cool in front of his friends and like throw the apple on the wall or like fruit or an orange or something and it splatters on the wall and all these idiot kids think it's funny. And then like the guy at the end of the day who's, I don't know, has kids, who has a mortgage and stuff, and is just trying to get through life and like be a good dad to his kids and spend time with them with time he has. And like he comes to work and someone just made his job way more harder with no second thought. And it's like, it's just that easy to create, like, to make the world a worse place. And to like, not like, you know what, it's just like, it's just that easy to just make life shitty when it takes just, and it could have been just as easy to not do that, right? To just not like ruin, like make a mess somewhere or like call someone a bad name or something like that. It's just like there's so much, especially when people have things going on at home that you don't see. That's the main thing, is that like you just don't see what people are carrying as burdens, right? Especially as a kid, and that's fair. Like for kids in elementary and high school, it's like you're not aware of that. Your brain's not fully developed, so you kind of could forgive that. But the point is that like some kids grow up faster because at home they've been forced to mature faster to survive. Like it could be like they have, I don't know, like a single parent household and they just don't have a lot of money. So the kid has to really think about adult things like, oh, how do I help my mom or dad like save money or something like that? Or maybe they have both parents and they don't really give them attention, or like they one could be like an alcoholic or a drug addict or something, but like it's just hard to live at home. So the kid is forced to learn these adult tactics to go through life more maturely, right? And so it's funny that like as we realize how vulnerable we really are in things like that and how weak we can become in moments of where corruption or evil or bad things come at us, it's like in those moments you realize like how easy it is to destroy and how just like not worth it is to just make life worse for people, and how you just again just build yourself up to fight and stand against the corruption that you might have, like, I don't know, have like hurt or ruined your life earlier when you were younger. But as you get older, you gain the tools to just stand your ground and if anything, hopefully become a role model yourself. See how this all ties in, and become a beacon and a pillar for others to look at you and see it's possible to say no to continuing to make the people and the world and areas around you worse by just choosing not to make it worse, being aware of those around you and just understanding, like, again, we're all here for each other. That's the point of life, to connect with other human beings. It's one thing to, again, going back to that video game analogy, yeah, you could just sit at a computer and dilute yourself, but to connect with something you have no control over, another human being with a genuine connection, with no like hidden agenda, bullshit, leverage type situation, it's like, that's life. That's the beauty of life, to really talk and interact with someone and they accept you, and vice versa on a genuine level, is the most beautiful experience in life. So at the end of the day, people, a good role model is what leads you there. So I would like to thank the creators of Naughty Dog, Insomniac, and anyone else who creates video game characters and who spends the time to actually write out stories and understand, you know, human behavior and life lessons and wisdom, and subtly infuse that into a product that was essentially funded with like money, with the idea to make more money for corporations. It's just nice to know there are good people in the world choosing to make the good choices and not make the world a worse place. And with that, I'd like to thank you for listening to my Ranger Rant. Just so you know, all my Ranger Rants, if you'd like to listen more, there's more on my channel and stuff. There might be a link showing up now. But I'd like you guys to share one of your experiences with the role models and stuff. And if anything I've said resonated with you, if you have anything to add to the conversation, please do. And yeah, and just another little note, all these are one take. I don't edit these. This is all just off the top of my head. And yeah, so hopefully that resonated with you guys and you learned and to grow more and stuff and all that stuff. So yeah, thanks for listening and have a great day. See you next time. Cheers.